This program is brought to you in part by Holtzman Oil and Propane, serving residential, commercial, and agricultural customers with the delivery of heating oil and propane. Online at holtzmancorp.com.
It was the 1950s. America loved baseball, and the little town of Stanley, Virginia was no different. You see, in that small town, life was simple, and the friendships that were forged lasted a lifetime. Yep, for young boys, many of those friendships were fostered on the baseball field. And that's where this journey to Cooperstown begins. In the 1950s, baseball was about the only thing on most boys' minds, including J.C. Painter. You see, his favorite team was the Washington Senators, and he idolized Mickey Vernon. He was a lefty, threw left and batted left, just like J.C.
He was a pretty good ball player, and I always kept up with his stats.
The ever-popular Mickey Vernon was also the favorite of Stanley native Bucky Nauman, and on Saturday and Sunday afternoons there was usually a family backyard game being played at the painter's house or at the Naumans'. Shoot, there wasn't a boy in town that didn't want to be just like the big leaguers.
We wanted to do everything like the big leagues did, so we had to have some chewing tobacco. We went down and we put our pennies together, and we got a poke of Red Man tobacco. And we all came up and we passed it around, all the kids taking the chew of tobacco, and I take some, and just as we were about ready to start, an older fellow that lived down the road from us, he came in with a load of hay. He said, "Boys, how about y'all helping me a little bit? Help me get this hay in the barn before y'all start playing." So we did. We all jumped in, and it was so dry that summer and dusty that they were throwing the hay bales, hitting the floor and bouncing. And here I had this tobacco in my mouth, and hay dust getting up my nose, and everybody had taken some. And here I didn't want to spit my tobacco out, and I got a swallow in it. It wasn't too long. That barn got a spinning on me, and I had to come out of there. Never will forget, there was a little outhouse out back of the property that we were playing on, and I spent the next couple of hours in that, being sick. That was something I never tried again, because no more ball playing that day for me.
Eventually, other kids in the neighborhood began to join the Painters and the Naumans, and it wasn't long until the backyards weren't big enough to host the games. So, in 1953 and 1954, the boys moved the games to a couple different cow pastures. Now, the boys didn't have money to buy any type of equipment, so they used what they had, old boards and dried cow pies as bases.
We played in the cow pastures. We had to run cows out of the field, run them down in the corner of the field where we could play. We had to clean up the cow piles, the wet ones. We didn't always get them all.
Through the years, the boys played in several pastures, but eventually they ended up playing in two main fields about 1.5 miles apart. After some serious negotiations between the kids, it was decided to designate a team for each field. The Shady Grove Dodgers would play their home games on the Painters Field. The Pineywood Tigers would play their home games on Donnie Wilson's field.
I started out with the Pineywood Tigers, and I was playing left field, and somebody hit a fly ball to me in left field, and I caught it and threw it back in the shortstop. And when I turned around, my foot stepped in the first pile of manure. So I stand out there and wipe my feet off, But next time I heard somebody said, "Jerry, here comes another ball your way, get it." It hit on the side of me. I said, uh-oh. I picked the ball up and threw it back in and called and come back in the dugout, well, the field. Next day I traded to the Dodgers.
Now, J.C., he loved statistics, and being Mickey Vernon's biggest fan, well, he monitored Vernon's performance closely. After all, they were both first basemen.
There was a lot of conversation or arguments about who won the most games or who was the best batter. So I thought, well, next year I'll just keep records and we'll see who was the best.
Before the 1955 season started, J.C. explained to each player that he was required to write down exactly what he did at each bat. He even told him to write small enough to get the information on one line, because the next line was for the next hitter. If a player got a hit and was left on base, he was required to record that information on his line before going out to the field. They operated on the honor system.
I think each individual had to go and sign his name and what he did that day, how many hits he's gotten, how many times at bat. But as far as him keeping on like he did all this time, no, I didn't thought he'd keep that.
I can remember a piece of paper on the ground with the players' names, and at the end of the inning, you would put a mark beside your name for how many times you went to bat, how many hits you got, runs scored. And I didn't know why we were doing that. I figured it was just to make sure, who won the game. And didn't realize that he was taking that home and compiling it. And ever so many games he would run statistics on batting averages, runs. I mean, it's amazing what he did.
After a few games, J.C., well, he'd take the sheets home and record the score and stats for each player in a composition book. Now, one name recorded in those ledgers stands out: Pat Jenkins. Patricia Jenkins, to be exact.
She was a good ball player, too.
Yeah, she was just as good as the boys.
I don't know how many games. They wouldn't let her play no place except at Jerry's place.
Yeah.
Clarine, his mother, kept an eye on her because she was the only girl. And back in them days, mothers didn't let the girls stray too far away, especially the whole gang of boys. Just
Well, now, J.C.'s statistics showed that the Pineywood Tigers won the season in 1955 with a record of 32-29, and Nelson Painter was the home run king with 86 home runs. J.C. was awarded batting champ with a .713 average. It was the Shady Grove Dodgers who won the 1956 season with a record of 26-21. And Nelson Painter was again named home run king with 30 home runs, and J.C. repeated as batting champ with a .707 average. Boy, oh boy, for those 2 seasons, J.C. recorded every at-bat, hit, run scored, and home run while documenting the winning and losing pitchers of each game. And there were plans to play again in 1957, but as young boys do, they grew up and, well, the Dodgers and Tigers disbanded. It was decades later that J.C. came across those old ledgers while searching for something in his attic. Man, seeing those statistics brought back some of his best memories. He gave the ledgers to his cousin Jim, who was also a member of the Sandlot team.
Well, I got them and I couldn't believe what I was seeing. This was 3 years ago. I couldn't, here's 2 composition books. 1955, 1956 season, there are 2 of them. man, I sit down and opened them things and started going through there, and I said, God, I can't believe this. I mean, I knew JC. I can remember us having to write down, what we done when we went to the bat, whether we got a hit, blah, 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 and everything, but I never had no idea he had these things.
It was in June of 2014 that Jim ran into former teammate Donnie Wilson at a Page County High School class reunion.
We got to talking. I said, Donnie, he said, you remember we used to play ball together? That's what he said, just out of the blue. I said, Donnie, you ain't gonna believe this. And I started telling what JC found in his attic. These stats he kept where we played ball back in 55 and 56.
Oh, the memories those papers brought back. The ledgers were passed around by several players, but they eventually ended up in Donnie Wilson's possession.
And I looked at those things for a long time. And then I set them aside for a while, and I got them back out, and I thought it'd be a good time to have a little get-together.
So, Donnie organized a small reunion of players at the local Hawksbill Diner. They all wondered what they should do with the documents. They tossed around the idea of donating them to the library or a local museum.
And the last thing I said was, well, maybe we can send them to Cooperstown in the Baseball Hall of Fame. Well, everybody got to laughing about that. That was the joke of the day, and probably for about a month. Then JC said, oh yeah, I always wanted my name to be in the Baseball Hall of Fame. But it was a big joke.
Now, the idea of Cooperstown kept tugging at Donnie. He thought, why not? Let's see if the Baseball Hall of Fame is interested. So he contacted the National Baseball Hall of Fame. A week later, Donnie received a letter postmarked Cooperstown, New York. Cooperstown.
And I didn't know whether I wanted to open it or not. And I opened it and I couldn't believe it. I couldn't hardly read through it. Well, I started reading and I started crying. And my wife come out, got in the car, and she said, what in the world's wrong with you? I said, I got the letter back from Cooperstown. And I tried reading it to her and I couldn't do it.
And here was a diary for 2 years of boys playing sandlot down in Virginia. It was hard to believe it even existed. So we were very, very excited.
They said, well, we don't have anything like it. We got a lot of items up here, but we don't have any records pertaining to sandlot baseball. And I just thought, wow, that's, I'm really glad I kept them.
Sandlot baseball, once upon a time, was a common form of recreational activity for young boys. It was primarily boys. Some girls played, but it was mostly boys. And it dates back to a time before children had everything regimented for them. And I grew up playing sandlot baseball, and it was a chance to where you would play with your friends, and you had to form your own rules. You had to form your own teams. You did it without the intervention of adults. So we had to learn to do things on our own. And you would make adjustments on a daily basis, depending upon how many players you had, what field you were playing on, all those little variables that happen. Children don't really get that anymore. But for a 100-year period, this sandlot game was a predominant form of activity for young boys. Unfortunately, there's almost no documentation. We all have our stories, we all have our anecdotes, but there's very little in the way of artifacts and documents.
Well, the Hall of Fame asked Donnie to carefully wrap the ledgers and ship them, but Donnie had another idea. He tracked down all of the former players and found out that 29 out of the original 40 were still alive, some living as far as Texas and Washington State. Donnie organized a trip to hand-deliver those papers to Cooperstown. Yes, sir, about 60 people, a combination of sandlot players and supporters from the Stanley community, traveled to Cooperstown on July 12, 2016.
We found out that they were going to visit, said, all right, we're going to get this as a new item for the collection. That's very exciting. So I talked to our mayor, Jeff Katz, and told him what was going on. I said, you know, would you be there as well to represent the village? Because they're bringing a county councilman with them. And he said, absolutely. I booked the Grandstand Theater, which was the only room we had that's big enough to hold all these people. And we had just this little ceremony where, you know, they handed the item over to us, and we did some interviews with the media, some of our local media, but some media that came with them as well.
When we walked in the theater up in the Hall of Fame and saw up on that screen, welcome Stanley Sandlot baseball team. That really brought a tear to your eye. A group of kids who love to play the game of baseball, and that happened to us.
Are you a baseball fan? That's holy ground. And when you walk in that auditorium and you see Stanley Sandlot baseball on the screen, and Jim Gates down there, and the mayor of Cooperstown, that was an exciting time.
And we come out into this auditorium, and I never will forget till I die. But up on that screen said, "Welcome, Stanley Sandlot baseball team." And I'm telling you, when I seen that, I got choked. I choked up, the Hall of Fame officials, and then the mayor of Cooperstown there, and here we are. It's Stanley, that little town of Stanley, and it's welcoming us.
I think that they were surprised at how interested we were. I don't think at first they understood that there is a complete dearth of artifacts on this topic, and for us to have this, and the fact that it's going to be here held in our archives permanently. It's here in perpetuity, so their great-great-great-grandchildren will be able to come here and see this diary.
It was preserved all these years, and now here it is at the Hall of Fame with us for everyone to enjoy over the generations. It's just a great thing. And he said he started it because it was always a dispute of who had the better batting average or who had the most runs. So in the beginning of the 55 season, he decided to start keeping a log on it. It was kept for 2 years, and the detail for a teenage boy to keep this up, including weather, or he also included trades that were made during the season. And then there's the playoff games, and that he kept notes on it that because some kids were visiting for the summer or just for 2 weeks, had to leave to go to school or had to leave because they were in a fair at the end of the summer. So the teams were lopsided, or they couldn't do the games because they didn't have enough players, or the weather was too cold. Now it's, September, October, the weather's cold, they can't play. So I think just having those kind of details, and it's from, a 12, 14-year-old's perspective, makes it different than other things that we do have. It looks like when I saw them that it's possible that he'd seen other scorebooks or scorecards from games that he had been to, and kind of just tried to mimic that. But just the fact that he just did it all himself by hand, day after day and after each game, is pretty amazing. And that it survived all these years. And here we have it. It's great. It's great.
Meeting all the older gentlemen who actually were in the book, I mean, there were a number of them and their families, and just getting to talk to them and their memories of playing. Of course, all of them had hit the game-winning home run at some point, but we could check the book and see, did they actually do that? But going through and just seeing some of the comments that, so-and-so was traded to so-and-so because his mom is calling him in early for dinner, and just things that, just the little day-to-day stories that happen in Sandlot baseball. But to have it written down and to be able to talk to the people who are involved, that just doesn't happen. And so that's, this special memory for us was just having the whole group here and being able to interact with them.
I think it'll definitely bring back memories, because I think back in the 50s, a lot of kids got together and played ball, and it wasn't organized. Everybody just, improvised where the bases were and what's considered a home run. So I think anyone of that generation looking at this would definitely be like, I remember doing that, or I remember this or that, or pretending to be, Willie Mays or someone. And I think it would definitely bring back good memories.
My favorite player was Mickey Vernon. He was a first baseman. He threw left and batted left. He was a two-time batting champion of the American League, and he was an all-star 5 times. But he was my favorite player.
My favorite team was the Washington Senators, and Don Locke was a favorite player, mainly because of his batting stance.
I always liked to watch Frank Hurd for the Washington Senators, because he was so big, the bat looked like a toothpick to me, you know.
But I love Ted Williams and love the Red Sox.
I liked all the Brooklyn Dodgers, especially Duke Snider and Gil Hodges.
Washington Senators was always my favorite baseball team. And one of the players that was on their team at the time that I really liked, his name was Jim Lemon. He was a big, tall, lean, lanky guy, about 6'6", 6'8". And the reason I liked him was just the way he stood in the batting box. His left foot be at the back of the box, and he would stretch out in almost the entire length of the batting box. And he could hit the ball a mile when he hit it. He wasn't a real, didn't hit a lot of home runs, but when he hit one, he could hit it a long ways.
Jim Busby was their center fielder. He was fast, and I thought I could play center field, and I really couldn't, but I tried.
I had 3 great ball players, Mickey Mantle, Lou Gehrig, and Jackie Robinson. Jackie Robinson, he broke the sound barrier for the African American players. He did a great job, and I always liked Mick because the way he ran and what he hit. And Lou Gehrig, I liked him because the way he looked after the kids and everything when he was growing up. And he went and played with the kids and everything when he wasn't playing Major League. He umpired for the kids. He's a true ball player.
Well, Lou Gehrig did not have any children of his own, but he had a soft spot in his heart for kids. And he did a variety of activities, whether it was visiting children in hospital or stopping to sign autographs before games, or tipping the paper boy and things of that nature with an autographed baseball. But once upon a time, there was this strong connection between some ball players and kids.
Well, in true Lou Gehrig fashion, these Sandlot boys are dedicated to philanthropy. Since their records were inducted into the National Hall of Fame, the fellows have stayed in touch and formed a new team, about 20 active members that work to improve their community by organizing fundraisers for youth sports teams, the local fire department, and so forth.
And back at Christmas, we give a needy family some money, to get Christmas gifts for the kids and stuff.
We've given back to the fire companies and all 3 of the Little League ball fields. We've given money back to them, and the girls that went to Florida for the championship game, we give money to them.
And we give to other charities, helping the town of Stanley and the other counties around, here and help them. And we have chicken barbecues. All of us get together and work at that, and the money we get that, we donate it back to the community. And it's a really good thing. People support us.
Their records residing in the National Baseball Hall of Fame is an honor, but these men just hope that when other Sandlot players see those statistics, it takes them back to their own playing days. The days of homemade bats, trading teams, bare feet, and, well, cow pies.
When I look back, it was all fun, what we did, the things we did. And I wouldn't change it. I wouldn't change it for nothing.
But I told all the guys, I said, that trip to Cooperstown was a bonus. To me it was, because all us getting back together meant a lot.
I never dreamed that, they would wind up in Cooperstown. I still can't hardly believe it, no.
This program has been brought to you in part by Holtzman Oil and Propane, serving residential, commercial, and agricultural customers with the delivery of heating oil and propane. Online at holtzmancorp.com.